Hey guys, tonight we're going to walk through a calendar so peculiar, so bafflingly unnecessary, that even the gods of ancient Egypt probably rolled their divine eyes at it. Imagine a civilization that gave us the pyramids, also setting aside an entire holiday just to honor rocks, that's right, stones, pebbles, the things you trip on when trying to be mysterious in a linen robe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments along with your local time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking along a sandstone corridor, warm from the sun and lined with tall columns wrapped in colorful linen. The air smells faintly of lotus and dust, lots of dust. It's the festival of the silent stones, or silent stones, a day not of war or harvest or flood, but of absolute, purposeful, ceremonial nothing. No talking, no music, no chisel-on-stone action, which is a big deal in a society where people wrote everything down on hard surfaces. This holiday, buried in the calendar sometime after the festival of the river smiles and before the feast of the first mosquito sting, was a day of quiet contemplation dedicated to the stillness of stones. You follow a procession of priests, each holding a perfectly smooth rock like a sacred relic. They walk barefoot across hot sand, placing these stones in shadowed alcoves to give them rest. It's unclear what kind of labor the stones are recovering from, but you're not here to argue, just to observe and not sneeze too loudly. And while historians agree that ancient Egyptians were deeply spiritual, this one stands out. There's no record of which god this holiday belonged to, nor why it lasted precisely 3 days, not one more or less. One theory, hotly debated by Egyptologists with too much time on their hands, suggests it began when a quarry collapsed, and workers declared it a divine message to let the stones sleep. Others think it was just an excuse for scribes to not write anything for a weekend. You sit in the temple courtyard, watching a cat lick its paw in a sunbeam. No one speaks. Even the birds seem unusually polite. Every so often, a priest gently taps a rock and whispers a single word, possibly a name or maybe just thanks. It's all very serious, and here's the thing. In the margins of some papyri, scribes doodled smiling boulders and pebbles with tiny eyes, suggesting not all took the ritual seriously. But satire or not, the festival endured for centuries. That's commitment. At noon you're handed your own rock. It's warm, smooth, and oddly comforting. You sit, you hold it. You think about nothing really, just the way the grain of the stone feels under your fingertips, the way time stretches out when nobody's allowed to speak. Suddenly you're aware of your own breathing, the soft rustle of linen around you, and the sound of wind playing between columns. It's peaceful, pointless, perfect. Because in a world obsessed with significance, the Egyptians carved out space for the absurdly unnecessary, and somehow that makes it all the more beautiful. You're sitting on the edge of a golden hill, staring out at the dusty horizon. The breeze is warm and dry, and each gust kicks up a curtain of fine sand that dances in the air as if it has a mind of its own. It's National Desert Dust Day, and all around you hundreds of Egyptians, from priests to merchants, farmers to nobles, look incredibly happy to be covered in dust. You try to maintain your composure as an old man walks past, you with a jar full of sand, and solemnly pours a handful over his own shoulders. He smiles at you, as if sharing an ancient secret. You return the gesture, trying not to sneeze. This celebration was born from a curious interpretation of an ancient text attributed to Thoth, the god of wisdom, which said, ambiguously, the earth in its purest form must touch the whole man, so that he understands the cycle of creation. Some believe that Thoth was referring to humility, others to the literal dust bath. The event always begins the same way. At dawn, participants leave their homes and walk through the streets, beating carpets, dusting statues, and shaking their robes vigorously. All this to ensure that the dust spreads and blesses the neighborhood. Priests prepare rituals on altars covered with thick layers of sand, and the faithful make symbolic offerings, usually small objects made of clay, partially buried in the ground. Historians still debate whether this holiday had any practical function, such as marking the beginning of the dry season, or whether it was simply a moment of collective resignation. After all, living in ancient Egypt meant living with dust all the time. Turning it into a reason for celebration was perhaps the only sensible way to deal with it. You walk up to a small makeshift temple made from papyrus stalks and worn-out cloth. Inside, a group of children chant what sounds more like synchronized sneezes than hymns. They take pride in participating in the pot choir, a recent tradition that symbolizes the purity of the airways, though ironically, everyone is coughing at Tim. Noon, when the sun is at its most merciless, the most anticipated moment arrives, the blessing of the breeze. Everyone turns to the west, where the dunes pile up in silence, and waits for a gust of wind that can blow the dust over the crowd. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, but no one complains. The absence of wind is also seen as a divine sign. You join the others and close your eyes. Sand slips discreetly between your eyelashes, sticks to the sweat on the back of your neck, seeps into the folds of your clothes. It's uncomfortable, sure, but there's something strangely comforting about it. As if accepting the discomfort is part of the ritual. And so Dust Day marches on, slow and hot and absurdly specific. No royal decree called for it. No god demanded its existence. And yet, century after century, there they were. The Egyptians celebrating the thing we most try to avoid, dirt in the air. Maybe you think they just understood something we forgot, that not everything has to be useful, that sometimes letting the dust settle, or even dancing with it, is the simplest way to feel human. You wake up early, perhaps too early, to the muffled sound of laughter outside. When you peek through the opening of the linen tent someone has so kindly left for you, what you see doesn't quite make sense, yet men and women, all with very serious faces, walk the streets with wigs in disarray, some with knots the size of fists, others that look like they've been licked by grumpy camels. It's disheveled wig week. You rub your eyes. Maybe you're dreaming. But no, that priest over there really is wearing a wig with chicken feathers woven into it and a decorative ceramic scorpion on top. For 7 days, no one in Egypt is allowed to comb their wigs. No one is allowed to use oil, incense, or even put on ornaments that organize the hair. The mess is sacred. The reason? An ancient, almost forgotten legend that tells of a desert spirit called Netefra, the god of lice. According to mythology, Netefra cursed a city for its hair vanity, spreading plagues wherever he went. To appease him, the people decided to show up with their hair as tangled as possible in a gesture of hair humility. The tradition caught on, and what was once an isolated superstition became an annual event, and a nightmare for those who suffer from frizz. You walk through the market where stalls sell anti-comb products, jars of scented mud, small bracelets that emit high-pitched sounds whenever someone tries to fix their appearance, and miniature Netefra figures to hang on clothes as talismans. Children love this holiday. For them, it's a chance to create the most absurd hairstyles possible, without fear of being reprimanded. There are unofficial competitions such as Most Creative Nest and Best Improvised Braid Knot. A boy walks past you with a wig in the shape of a sphinx made entirely of goat wool. You applaud him because his effort is worth it. Historians still debate whether the holiday originated as a social critique, perhaps mocking the wealthy who spent hours and fortunes caring for their elaborate wigs, or whether it was simply a collective excuse to take a break from hair maintenance. After all, maintaining a stylish wig in the Egyptian heat required more discipline than building a pyramid with your bare hands. At the local temple, you meet an elder who, with teary eyes, tells you how his grandmother was crowned Queen of the Tangle 3 years in a row. Apparently, she could embed entire artifacts into her wig, including a working model of a solar barge. At the end of the week, there is a ritual called Untying Sorrows, where everyone gathers by the Nile and dips their wigs into large basins of goat's milk and lotus flowers. It's symbolic, they say, a way of washing the cares away along with the tangled threads. You join in, of course. Your wig, luckily borrowed, floats on the surface of the water, puffy, disheveled, free. And for a brief moment, everything seems Peaceful, as if the simple act of not caring about your appearance is somehow liberating, because sometimes losing control is part of the beauty. And in ancient Egypt, that was a reason for a holiday. You stand before a circular courtyard where dozens of artisans work in silence intently. Their hands move with precision, braiding long, colorful ropes made of papyrus, straw, and even dyed linen threads. The atmosphere is solemn, almost sacred. It is the Feast of the Braided Rope, a holiday that, by all appearances, is not for tying anything together, but is taken extremely seriously. An elderly scribe approaches and offers you a symbolic piece of string with 3 poorly made knots in the middle. "Is this your first?" he asks, smiling proudly. You nod and he makes a gesture of blessing. Apparently this is a rite of passage. The purpose of this day is not to make something useful. Far from it. Tradition dictates that each person in the village weave at least a 3-meter rope, without cutting, without undoing, without repeating the patterns of the previous year. Then these ropes are wrapped around pillars, trees, donkeys, or simply left on the roofs of houses, as if the gods were going to bring them down from the sky for some hidden purpose. The origin of this holiday goes back to an ancient tale, almost a whisper among papyri, which tells of a ceremonial boat that sank because its oars were poorly tied. It is said that the pharaoh himself, in a rage, forced all his subjects to learn the value of a good tie, even if it was never used in practice. You watch as a group of young people try to braid a rope with 5 different tones. With each meter completed, they sing a song in which only the chorus makes sense. 1 turn, 2 turns, not in the heart. The rest is a jumble of ancient words that no one can accurately translate. Historians still debate whether this date was implemented, for logistical reasons, to encourage the production of building materials, or whether it was just another one of those symbolic celebrations that the Egyptians loved, full of hidden meanings that have been lost to time. Some believe it was a way to keep the population occupied during the extreme heat of the month of Paofi. Others believe there was something more spiritual to it all, the idea of braiding not only ropes, but also intentions, desires, and destinies. As you walk down the street, you notice that the older houses have ropes from years gone by hanging, like trophies. Some have almost fallen apart over time, but no one dares to take them down. One woman tells you that each rope carries an unspoken wish. Another says that one of her ropes once disappeared overnight, and that after that, her chronic headache simply disappeared. You decide to give it a try. You sit in the shade of a date palm, pick up dried fibers, and begin to weave. Your fingers stumble, the knots come undone, and for a few minutes you feel irritated, but soon you get into the swing of things. Passers-by nod in approval. It's not about perfection. It's about repetition, about keeping going even when the threads get tangled. At the end of the day, you tie your rope between 2 broken columns. It sways in the wind, making a soft sound, almost like an out-of-tune harp. And for some reason, it brings you peace. Because in ancient Egypt, even the rope that leads nowhere can somehow tie your spirit to the present moment. You're sitting on the banks of the Nile, watching a crowd gather in a circle around. Nothing, literally nothing. An empty patch of sand marked off by wooden stakes and red ropes. There are no boats, no water here, and yet everyone is preparing for a competition that they say will move imaginary oceans. It's the start of the imaginary boat tournament. You blink a few times, wait for some kind of vessel to appear, perhaps a symbolic model, or at least a plank with an oar. But no. The first competitor steps onto a small platform, squats slightly, extends his arms and begins to row in the air. Yes, that's exactly what it is, an official contest in which serious adults pretend to row. The crowd watches with critical attention. Each move is evaluated by a group of judges and with feathers in their hair and paper clipboards, who note the intensity of the facial expression, the fluidity of the gestures, and of course the degree of drama involved in the dunk. Because the highlight of the tournament isn't winning. It's falling out of the invisible boat in the most theatrical way possible, rolling on the ground, screaming in despair, arms stretched out to the sky in slow motion. It's all worth points. You're soon summoned by a friendly gentleman named Heru, who hands you a necklace made of clay shells and says, "You are now one of the North Wind's rowers. Honor your team." You smile, a little embarrassed, but get into the spirit of it. After all, everyone seems genuinely excited. The origins of the tournament date back to an obscure episode in which a river festival was cancelled due to extreme drought. In order not to disappoint the gods, or perhaps just the fish traders, the Egyptians decided to go ahead with the celebration even without boats. There, under the merciless sun, the idea of sailing with imagination was born. Historians still debate whether this practice began as satire, political protest, or simply as an outlet for climate frustrations. There is even a record of a famous scribe, Menkaure, writing an entire poem about the boat that does not get wet but still sinks hearts. You watch the next competitors with growing fascination. A burly man does a perfect imitation of a rower being hit by an invisible wave. The audience erupts in applause. At another point, a young woman stages a sudden storm, with gestures so intense that even a group of birds are startled and fly away. It's your turn. You take a deep breath, pretend to hold an oar, pull the air for the first time and feel your body sway. Your feet sink slightly into the sand, simulating the sway of the tide. You spin, stumble, simulate an elegant tumble and fall with the grace of a papyrus bending in the wind. The crowd goes wild. A judge gives you top marks for emotional delivery. You receive a handful of seeds as a prize and a symbolic certificate written in beetroot ink. Honorary rower of the imagined Nile. As the sun sets on the horizon, all participants gather for the traditional collective sinking, a silent gesture where each person pretends to disappear into the waters that do not exist. You follow them, lying on the sand with your arms outstretched as if you were floating, and as absurd as it may seem, this experience leaves something in you. Maybe it's laughter, maybe it's lightness. Maybe it's the notion that in ancient Egypt, even an imaginary boat could take people away from their worries, if only for one day a year. You wake before sunrise, guided by a soft call coming from the village rooftops. It's not music. It's not singing. It's more like the sound of bodies moving carefully in sync. As your eyes adjust to the dim light of dawn, you realize everyone is positioning themselves on the ground, stretching themselves out meticulously, like shadows. It's the day of the long shadow. In absolute silence, you see men, women, and children lying face down or on their sides, aligning their bodies according to the position of the rising sun. Some wear black cloaks, others cover their hair with dark fabrics. There is a strange stillness in the air, as if no one breathes more deeply than necessary. The warm stone floor, polished by time, becomes a stage for this spectacle of human shadows. The origin of this holiday? A partial eclipse that occurred centuries ago, which partially covered the Temple of Horus, with a shadow so long that the priests believed it was a divine warning. Since then, this rare phenomenon, recorded in only 2 incomplete papyri, has become a tradition. Even though the eclipse has never been repeated exactly the same way, the day of its occurrence has been immortalized. You find an empty space between 2 broken columns and lie down. The stone is warm. Your body forms an elongated silhouette, and an acolyte carefully traces your shadow with charcoal dust. Beside you, a woman whispers, "The shadow is the only part of us the gods cannot touch." You don't answer. You are not allowed to. Silence is the rule until sunset. Historians still debate whether this holiday had funerary, mystical, or simply meditative connotations. There are theories that link the practice to the cult of Osiris, god of death and rebirth, as lying down as a shadow would be a symbolic gesture of surrender and return. As the sun rises, the bodies shorten. The faithful slowly drag themselves along the ground, trying to keep their shadows as long as possible, as if prolonging their own silhouettes were a way of resisting time. Some hold objects in their hands, vases, sticks, sheets of papyrus, to stretch their forms. Others wear clay masks that enlarge their heads, creating distorted and mysterious figures. You watch everything with a sense of suspension. It is as if time has frozen. A group of children, no more than 6 or 7 years old, try to draw their shadows using crushed flowers. They laugh, but in whispers, as if lightness also had to respect the solemnity of the moment. Around noon, the most symbolic moment occurs. People turn to the south and one by one erase their drawn shadows. They use wet palm leaves or pieces of cloth soaked in Nile water. The gesture is slow, almost ceremonial. It is as if each person is erasing a piece of themselves, to then redraw themselves at dawn. You do the same. You watch the charcoal dust crumble beneath your damp fingers, forming dark trails on the stone. No one speaks, but you sense an exchange happening here, as if for a brief moment you have become part of the landscape, as silent as the temple stones, as light as the desert dust. At the end of the day, when the sun sets behind the distant palm trees, the village comes back to life. Laughter breaks out, someone whistles, a dog barks, people slowly stand up, stretching their bodies tired from doing so much idleness, and there is, curiously, a discreet joy in the air, because sometimes being shadow is what makes us perceive the light. You walk through a narrow square, between colorful cloth stalls and columns painted with faded hieroglyphics. There is something curious about the movement. Everyone seems to be searching for something tiny, almost invisible. Children crouch silently, priests peer out from under sheets of papyrus, and even the animals are carefully kept apart. You approach. A group gathered around a small cage decorated with gold ribbons. Inside there is nothing, or almost. It is the beginning of the ceremonial hunt for the golden mosquito. You blink, trying to understand. Someone whispers, "It appears only to the pure." Another, in a more matter-of-fact tone, says, "It's made of golden papyrus, but it's fast." And then it all begins. Each year, local artisans handcraft tiny mosquitoes made from papyrus. Paper painted with gold dust. They are placed in strategic locations around the village, hanging from trees hidden under benches, floating on tiny linen balloons, and the people are asked to find them, but not touch them. Yes, that is the crucial detail. Tradition dictates that no one should touch a mosquito. The correct gesture is to point at it with your right index finger and recite a sacred phrase which changes with each generation. Today, the phrase is, "Even the slightest hum carries the echo of the sun." You repeat it mentally until you memorize it. The ritual's purpose: to celebrate patience, or perhaps humility, or perhaps neither. Historians still debate whether the holiday's origins were an elaborate metaphor to remind the Egyptians of their own insignificance in the face of the cosmos, or simply a game that got out of hand. You watch a young girl find a golden mosquito hanging high on a pillar. She kneels reverently, whispers the phrase, and soon 3 musicians play a soft drum in her honor. She smiles. Someone offers her a fig as a reward. But there are rules. If anyone tries to touch the mosquito, even by accident, a group of watchers springs into action. Dressed in yellow robes and bee-shaped hats, they administer the symbolic penalty, a bath in aromatic myrrh smoke, and a sermon on the limits of desire. You find your mosquito at a crossroads, attached to the tail of a small cat statue. It glistens subtly in the sun. You point with your right finger and recite the phrase. A boy next to you applauds silently. You bow. A lady places a flower in, your hair as a sign of respect. All this for a piece of gold paper no bigger than your thumbnail. Skeptical historians say the holiday originated as a pastime during the height of the Nile flood, when there were so many real mosquitoes that they became the subject of songs and jokes. Turning them into symbols of virtue was perhaps the most creative way to turn a nuisance into a ritual. As the sun begins to set, the mosquitoes are collected with ivory tweezers and stored in ceremonial urns. People gather for the last buzz, a song played only on thin flutes which imitate the sound of insects flying. The melody is almost imperceptible, but some swear they can hear it with their hearts. You sit on the edge of a fountain. In your hands, a small sheet of papyrus on which someone has written, "Greatness is in what you choose not to take." You don't know who left it there, but it seems to make sense. And this is how the day ends, with a golden hum of silence in the soul and a light smile on the lips. You wake to a sweet scent in the air. Is there something of burnt caramel mixed with wax and wet clay? Intrigued, you follow the scent to the central plaza, where large stone tables have been arranged. in long rows. On top of them are plates, dozens, maybe hundreds, heaped with fake food. Literally clay fruits, wooden fish, wax cakes, eggs carved from limestone. Welcome to the banquet of inedible foods. You approach, curious, as a young woman with shell, necklaces, balances a jug of non-existent juice and offers you a glass made of soap. Toast to the void, she says, with the seriousness of someone offering real wine. You raise the glass. The people around you applaud. The ritual has officially begun. The rule is simple. No one is allowed to eat real food until sunset. All day long, everyone partakes of this symbolic banquet, where the appearance of abundance is celebrated, not its substance. Eating here would be considered a breach of spiritual trust. The body must desire and renounce all at the same time. Udati. Find your place at one of the tables and sit between a scribe with a painted mustache and a lady who is chatting happily with a clay apple. The scribe comments in a calm tone, "The gods watch us more closely when we pretend to be content." You don't know if he is joking or philosophizing. Probably both. The origins of this holiday are uncertain. Some say it was created in times of famine as a way to maintain morale. Others suggest it was a ritual of self-control, a metaphor for the cycle of the Nile floods, the waiting, the longing, the future abundance. Historians still debate whether the banquet was a disguised political protest, a critique of wastefulness at the tables of the nobles. You touch a fish carved so realistically that it almost slides off the tray. Your plate contains small, clay cakes filled with dried seeds. A craftsman next to you proudly explains that each piece takes days to mold. The texture is the secret, he says, pushing a wooden loaf that creaks like old bamboo. The children, as always, have adapted the ritual to their own style. They put on little plays where they fight over a plaster pudding or pretend to faint. From hunger, in front of a chicken carved from pumice stone. You laugh with them. One girl even hands you a cabbage made of green papyrus with the solemn warning, "Be careful, it's spicy." Throughout the day, there are speeches. Speakers stand on pedestals and recite poems about the flavors, cave absence, the chewing of emptiness, and the satiety of the spirit. Some are touching, others so absurd that they provoke suppressed laughter. And yet, no one dares to chew a single real grape. Modern historians try to explain this ritual as a clear example of the philosophical sophistication of the Egyptians, a collective exercise in symbolism, discipline, and social theater. But there are also those who say that it all started with a calendar error. A large feast was scheduled for the wrong day, and the food did not arrive on time. Instead of cancelling, they decided to improvise. And improvisation became a tradition. At the end of the day, when the sky begins to change color, a clay trumpet is blown. This is the signal that the symbolic fast is over. Everyone gathers around large steaming pots, now with real food, and laughter returns with a vengeance. Some eat with their hands. Others toast with tamarind juice, as if it were the wine of the gods. You help yourself to a fresh loaf of bread and realize that it is exactly the same shape as the plaster model that has been in front of you all day. For a moment, it seems as if everything is doubled, the real and the imaginary side by side. And maybe that's the point. Because in ancient Egypt, even what you don't eat feeds the soul. You're leaning against a shadowed wall, trying to figure out what exactly is about to happen. The street in front of you has been taken over by a parade, not of people, not of cars, but of creatures that definitely don't exist. Men covered in blue feathers march alongside women with tails of golden scales. A group of children appear, with crocodile heads and cardboard wings. A lady dances slowly with 3 eyes drawn on her forehead and a cloak that glows as if made of moonlight. It's the parade of invented animals, and you're about to witness one of the most surreal and endearing spectacles in the Egyptian calendar. You join the crowd, who watch with the same enthusiasm they would for a royal rite of passage. There is no sarcasm, no mockery, just quiet respect for an event that serves no practical purpose, but sparks everyone's imagination. The tradition dates back, according to some papyri decorated with bizarre illustrations, to a feverish dream of the pharaoh Nebkare, in which he saw a forest full of creatures that dare not be born. Upon waking, He ordered that this dream be celebrated annually, with masks, costumes, and proper names for each imaginary animal. Historians still debate whether Nebkare really existed. Others believe that the dream was that of a priestess who mistook a tea recipe for sacred hallucinations. Regardless of its origin, the parade became part of the calendar and has never been questioned again. You walk alongside a young man dressed as an adufeg, a cross between an antelope, a fish, and a scorpion. He proudly explains that the adufeg lives in the clouds and eats sleeping thunder. You smile, unable to help but smile. Next to him, a lady introduces her moo, a kind of pink armadillo with butterfly wings and the voice of a harpist. Each creature has a name, a story, and even its own eating habits. Some participants hand out fact sheets with illustrations and interesting facts, as if they were in a dream zoo. And every year, new species emerge, while others disappear without warning, like dim constellations. In the middle of the parade, there is a judging panel, made up of 3 elders wearing vulture masks, who observed the costumes and invented stories with half-closed eyes and comical seriousness. They write notes on papyrus and whisper among themselves. At the end of the parade, they award the best unborn creature of the year, with a crown made of pressed feathers and petals. You witness the victory of a creature called seretni, a kind of snail with duck legs and a spiral trunk. The creator, a girl no more than 10 years old, accepts the prize amid tears and applause. The people shout the creature's name, as if it were real. In that moment, perhaps it is. Later, there is a symbolic exhibition where each costume is carefully placed on straw pedestals, and people walk around in reverent silence. You find yourself reading descriptions with phrases like with habitat anxious hearts and mating period during emotional eclipses. Modern historians try to catalogue the invented animals of ancient Egypt, as if this could make scientific sense. But perhaps the beauty lies precisely in the absence of logic, a celebration of the absurd, of pure creativity, of the freedom to imagine without limits or consequences. You return to the inn with the image of a winged elephant, with flamingo legs still dancing in your mind. Outside, the drums continue to beat, and the streets are filled with glitter made from stone dust and dried flowers, because in ancient Egypt, even beings that were never born had the right to a parade. You wake up with the strange sensation that something is ours too still. There is no market noise, no singing, no laughter, just a faint whisper of the wind blowing almost imperceptibly. When you go out into the street, you notice that everyone is still, facing the same direction, east. Their bodies are slightly tilted, as if waiting for something invisible. It is the day of the east wind meditation. You watch, not understanding much, until a lady in a robe of dried leaves whispers, "Don't talk, he might be listening." You decide not to argue. Over the centuries, the Egyptians learned to respect the cycles of the winds with an almost poetic kind of devotion. But the east wind was special, rare, mysterious. He appeared when he pleased, and when he did, everything changed. The smells in the air, the direction of the birds, the mood of the camels. Some said it was the breath of Shu, god of the air, who came to visit the mortal world only when he felt homesick. Others claimed that the east wind carried forgotten messages from dead pharaohs. Historians still debate whether this belief arose from some real meteorological observation or simply from the need to make sense of the unpredictability of the days. But that hardly matters now, because there you are among dozens of people standing still, waiting. The rule is simple: no talking, no eating, no writing, just waiting. The body should be kept in an open posture, as if being gently pushed by a breeze. The eyes should not blink more than necessary. The hands rest on the knees, palms facing upwards. You obey. Slowly, your mind slows down. The subtle sounds become more intense. The rustling of dry leaves, the creak of a wooden door in the distance, the sound of your own stomach growling softly. A boy passes by carrying a feather tied to a string. He lets go of the string in the wind, but the feather falls straight to the ground. No east wind. Not yet. At noon, some begin to hum, not with their voices, but with their throats closed, producing sounds that sound more like the buzzing of a beehive than actual music. This is called the void choir. According to tradition, this encourages the wind to reveal itself like whistling to a shy dog. You try and are surprised to find your own hum echoing with the others. For a brief moment, you feel part of something very old, very big, and completely impractical. After hours of stillness, something happens. A gentle breeze picks up a handful of sand. There's no way to tell if it's just the ordinary wind, but everyone around you looks up. Some smile, others weep silently, some kneel. You just close your eyes and feel it. It is a short, almost imperceptible breath, but enough to mark the end of the meditation. A stone bell is rung. The ritual ends. People stand up, stretch their bodies, yawn. There are hugs, even between strangers, as if they had gone through something difficult together. And in a desert, you are given a piece of papyrus with a single symbol drawn on it, a spiral drawn in blue ink. It represents the path of the wind within the mind, someone explains. As you walk back, your feet dragging in the hot dust, you think that maybe the east wind never really blew, or maybe it did. But that doesn't matter, because in ancient Egypt, even that which you hope for in vain becomes a reason to celebrate. You are sitting in a circular room, lit only by the soft glow of seashell lamps. The atmosphere is silent, but charged with an almost magical expectation. Around you, men and women gaze serenely at each other, holding rolled-up papyrus or small talismans shaped like question marks. This is the beginning of the cult of the unanswered question. A young woman stands in the center of the circle, looks at everyone and asks, "What color is the water when it sleeps?" Absolute silence. No one answers. No one can answer. This is the sacred rule. Questions must be asked aloud, with true intent, but never answered. Trying to answer breaks the spell, like interrupting a deep dream with a shrill alarm. You are invited to approach the circle. A priest places a small hollow stone in your hand, a symbol of the void that resonates. He whispers, "When you don't know, you are closer to the truth." You're not sure if this makes sense, but you nod respectfully. The cult, according to scattered records, began with an Egyptian philosopher whose name has been lost, but who, according to oral tradition, asked the god Thoth 100 questions and received only silence in response. The silence was interpreted as revelation, and so the cult was born. Historians still debate whether this cult was real or merely a sophisticated satire against the endless debates of the priestly schools. There are papyri that suggest that the cult was banned for a time because it caused spiritual confusion. But it always came back like the questions that never go away. During the ceremony, each person asks their question out loud. Some are deeply philosophical. If the soul has a form, does it change over time? Where does the longing for something we've never seen come from? Others are so simple they hurt. What does my cat think when he ignores me? What do the gods do when we are not looking? You wait your turn. When you arrive, the room goes silent. You take a deep breath and ask, "If I don't find what I'm looking for, was it me who was lost?" A soft murmur runs through the room. No one says anything, but you feel like everyone understands. After each question, the group remains silent for a few minutes. Some close their eyes. Others smile with the corners of their lips. It is a practice more about listening than speaking. The idea, apparently, is that the question echoes inside each person until it dissolves, or not. At the end of the ceremony, everyone places their questions written in small clay pots. The pots are sealed with wax and buried in a circle around. A faceless statue, a symbol of divine ignorance. It is said that if a question fades away over time, it is because it has answered itself. You participate in the burial of the pots. You feel the warm earth between your fingers. With each buried question, a piece of uneasiness also seems to rest. It's comforting in a strange way. As the group disperses, someone hands him a necklace with a single grain of sand suspended in the center. It is to remember that the smallest things generate the biggest doubts. And that day you understand something. In ancient Egypt, silence was not an absence. It was an invitation, a space left blank for each person to fill in, as they wished or not. Because sometimes what never gets answered is exactly what keeps us moving. You are in a narrow alley between two stone buildings, where the smell of old fabrics, ancient dust, and dried flowers fills the air like an indecipherable perfume. Men and women parade through the streets wearing patched tunics, torn cloths, and cloaks that were clearly once cushions, curtains, or even sacks of grain. It is the festival of the forgotten fabric. You follow a lady covered in a rolled-up rug and bone barrettes, who proudly tells you, "This was the tablecloth from my grandfather's first dinner with my grandmother." The pride isn't in the aesthetics. It's in the story behind the garment. During this celebration, no one wears new fabrics, no one buys anything. Tradition demands that forgotten, discarded, stained, or completely out of fashion clothes be worn. The more eccentric and worn, the greater the prestige. It is not just a fashion show. It is a fashion show of memories. You walk down a street where a group of musicians play instruments covered in swaths of multicolored fabric, while dancers gyrate in robes sewn from scraps of faded velvet, cracked leather, and frayed linen. Each movement raises a small cloud of dust, and no one seems to care. The origin of this holiday is shrouded in legend. One legend tells of a time when, during a period of drought and famine, the Egyptian people decided to transform the shame of poverty into a symbol of honor. Instead of hiding their worn-out clothes, they began to display them with pride. The ceremony was so well received that it was repeated year after year, even when abundance returned. Historians still debate whether the event arose spontaneously or was instituted by priests as a way to redefine the value of common objects. Some papyri suggest that even the pharaoh himself attended wearing robes made from the clothes of retired servants, a symbolic gesture of humility and social unity. You pass a group of young people sewing their clothes live on the street, competing to see who can come up with the most absurd costume in an hour. One of them has created a tunic from scraps of used candles. Another wears a cape made entirely from onion sacks. You laugh, but you're also moved. There's a sincere creativity here, a celebration of reinvention. At noon, the Great Patch takes place, a ceremony where everyone exchanges pieces of their clothing with one another. You are approached by a girl who hands you a strip of fabric with paint stains on it. "It was from my first painting," she says, and pins it to your tunic. You return the piece of cloth from your neck. And so you don't just exchange fabric, you exchange stories. As the day progresses, clothes become living collages of memories, scraps, and meanings. There is something liberating in the aesthetics of improvisation, in the beauty of imperfection. No one tries to hide stains. They are exalted. As the sun begins to set, there is the final parade, called the Patchwork Walk. People walk in silence along the banks of the Nile, their clothes billowing like faded banners of intimate victories. There is no judging. There are no prizes. Just the silent recognition that everything old was once new and can still be beautiful. You sit by the water, watching your reflection shimmer with the new colors you now carry in your body, and feel a kind of peace that comes not from luxury but from memory. Because in ancient Egypt, even forgotten fabrics had a day to be remembered. You turn a corner of pale stone and suddenly stop. There are stairs everywhere. Wooden stairs, clay stairs, improvised stone stairs, small stairs with 2 steps, tall stairs leaning against walls that lead nowhere, stairs on top of carts, ladders tied to trees. It's the festival of stairs that lead nowhere. You watch a very serious man climb the steps of a ladder, leaning against a smooth wall, rest his forehead on the top, and remain there, silent, for a minute. Then he slowly descends, and everyone around applauds with reverence. According to tradition, these stairs are symbolic tributes to attempts that never made it. They are celebrations of effort itself, of the human impulse to climb, even without knowing if there is anything at the top. And interestingly, in ancient Egypt, this gesture was transformed into an annual ritual with rules, hymns, and even friendly competitions of poetic climbs. Historians still debate whether the festival originated as a parody or had more philosophical roots. Some ancient papyri speak of a royal architect who designed a monumental staircase that, due to a miscalculation, ended in the air. Instead of destroying the work, the pharaoh declared the site sacred for the unrevealed purposes of the gods. And that's it. The festival was born. You are invited to choose a ladder. A freckled teenager wearing a colorful turban hands you a portable bamboo ladder and says, "It has already led 3 dreamers to perfect out." You thank him, take it carefully, and begin your ceremonial walk through the other ladders. There are instructions. Each participant must climb their ladder to the last step and make a gesture there. It can be a greeting, a silent thought, or a grimace. The important thing is not to look for meaning. The festival is not about answers. It is about movements. You find a quiet corner, lean your ladder against a crooked tree trunk, take a deep breath, and climb up. The wind blows slowly. You can't see anything at the top, of course, but from up there the view changes a little. You see the others, all with their ladders leaning in absurd places. In the air, against rocks, inside holes, some at angles so steep that they defy logic. And yet they all climb up. An older woman sings a song called "The Steps of the Void." A group of children compete to see who can balance a ladder on their head for the longest time. A man places the ladder in the river and climbs up anyway, with wet feet, looking up at the sky as if something very important was about to happen. At dusk, the final ritual takes place, the solemn dismantling. All participants remove their ladders from their places and carry them to the city center, where they form a huge pile, a collective sculpture of suspended intentions. There, a symbolic flame is lit at the top, very cautiously, as wooden ladders are not exactly safe. The smoke rises slowly, taking with it, they say, all the almosts of the year. You join the crowd to watch. Someone hands you a step-shaped amulet made of pumice stone, to remind you that climbing, even without arriving, is still a movement. And you understand, because in ancient Egypt, even stairs that led nowhere had their place, right at the center of the human soul. You wake up and realize that the village is strange. There are no flags, no musicians, no offerings, no scent of incense, no children's laughter. Everyone walks slowly, silently, with serene expressions. The usual decorations have been replaced by nothing. No flowers, no symbols. It is the emptiest day of the year, literally. You are about to participate in the recreation of the day nothing happened. According to ancient calendars preserved in stone temples and stained papyrus, there is an enigmatic record of an entire day in which absolutely nothing was documented. No births, no deaths, no war, no harvests, no letters written, no temperature records, no recorded prayers. It's as if time, for a brief moment, had dozed off. And then, as the centuries passed, this void became the reason for one of the most unique holidays in ancient Egypt. A day dedicated to the celebration of absence, of total pause, of the curiously liberating idea that sometimes nothing is exactly what we need. You walk down a street where locals sit in front of their houses, simply staring at the horizon. Some are dozing silently. Others hold empty pots as if they were relics. A cat passes by. No one reacts. The only rule of the day: no events can be created. Nothing can be started, finished, or recorded. You can't tell stories or start projects. You can just exist. A woman offers you a blank sheet of paper. "This is today's diary," she says. You thank her and put it in your pocket. Another woman, dressed in an unadorned beige robe, holds a stone bowl with absolutely nothing inside. She shows it to you reverently. You nod respectfully. Historians still debate whether the empty day record was actually a mistake, or whether someone deliberately erased something. Some argue that it was a mystical gesture, an attempt to leave space in time for the gods, so to walk among humans unnoticed. Others believe it was simply an administrative accident caused by a tired scribe. You come across a group of young people sitting in silence, with their eyes closed. They are practicing objectless observation, a type of meditation where you stare into space, expecting nothing, desiring nothing. And, surprisingly, you begin to feel something curious, relief. No pressure to be productive, no expectation of saying something right, no need to make an appearance. The world continues to exist, and you are there, just following along. In Siuna, Uanio, the late afternoon, the only ceremony of the day takes place. the collective breathing. All the villagers gather in the central square. There is no speech. There is no guide. They simply breathe in and out together at the same time. Once, and that's it. Then everyone leaves in silence. You return to your accommodation with the blank sheet of paper still in your pocket, perhaps more valuable than any papyrus full of stories. When you go to bed, you understand that nothing happened that day. And because of that, something in you has changed. Because in ancient Egypt, even emptiness had a place reserved for it and was honored with deep respect. You wake up early, still a little dazed from a dream you can't remember. When you open the thick curtain, you see people walking slowly all towards the same point, a circular clearing on the edge of the village where the sun barely reaches and the ground is covered in fresh clay. It's the last day of the ceremonial calendar, the vigil of dry clay. You join a group that is carefully carrying large mounds of clay molded into various shapes, simple blocks, unfinished sculptures, even some pieces that resemble giant pillows made of mud. Everyone sits around the circle of packed earth and positions their mounds respectfully. No one touches them after that. The only task of the day is to observe, to wait, to let the clay dry under the heat of the sun, without interference, without molding, without correcting. A slow, almost imperceptible but sacred process. Tradition has it that this ritual began as a tribute to patience. It is said that an ancient craftsman, frustrated with a sculpture that would never dry properly, sat down to observe it for hours, and in that time found the calm he had been seeking. His story has been passed down as an example of devotion to the natural time of things. Historians still debate whether the practice originated in temples as a metaphor for the transition of the soul or in artisan schools as spiritual training. There is evidence that some desert monks would take blocks of clay with them and place them in front of temples, only to watch them slowly harden as if they were an invisible offering. You choose a piece of raw clay. You don't shape it. You don't touch it anymore. You just place it on a small wooden board. Around you, others do the same. No one talks. The only things that move are the shadows. Throughout the day, the clay changes. First, it darkens. Then, small cracks appear on its surface. Each one seems to tell a silent story, as if time itself were writing with invisible fingers, and people silently read these cracks with the eyes of those who understand that everything that lives must first dry out from within. Young children are taught to observe without touching. It is a lesson in restraint. A father tells his son, "The clay teaches," but only when it decides. At dusk, the pieces that have managed to dry completely are carefully collected. They are placed on a long stone table without a name, without an author. Nobody knows whose is what, because here we don't celebrate the artist, we celebrate time. You look at your piece. It's not completely dry. There's a small damp spot still in the center, and so you don't pick it up, you leave it there and you smile, because that's a choice too. The ceremony ends with an even deeper silence than usual. People slowly leave, some empty-handed, others holding pieces of solid clay, fragments of a day when the world stopped to wait. You walk back feeling lighter. The sound of your own footsteps on the dry earth seems part of the ritual, and maybe it is, because in ancient Egypt, even that which needed time to harden was remembered with a day all its own. Night has fallen gently over the village. You are lying down now with your eyes half closed, still feeling the soft warmth of the last light of day touching your skin. Around you, everything seems quieter than ever. No drums are beating, no music in the background, no ceremony in the distance, only the sound of the light wind blowing through the palm trees and the peaceful silence of things that no longer need to happen. You take a deep breath and let your body sink into the mattress. You can still feel the dust of dry clay on your fingers, a sign that time has passed. Without rushing, without demanding, it has simply passed. An entire day has been dedicated to the act of observing, and without realizing it, something in you has also dried up. Perhaps an old rush, perhaps an urgency that was not yours. Outside, the Nile continues to flow, as calm as a sleeping serpent. The sky is clear, dotted with pale stars. And even if you don't understand the names of the Egyptian constellations, something about them seems familiar, as if the ancients had looked up at the same sky as you and felt this kind of peace too. This silent truce between the days. Now your mind starts to wander, to the stairs with no destination, the parades of creatures that were never born, the questions that no one answered. Everything that seemed strange at first now makes sense, not with the logic of reason, but with the deeper logic of rest. And then you close your eyes, because in ancient Egypt, even the days when people asked for nothing had space to welcome everything their hearts needed. Good night, sleep well, and dream of the east wind passing slowly over the clay you have left to dry.